Today's episode is brought to you by Harbour Dance Centre, located in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia. Harbour Dance Centre is a place to explore what dance is to the individual. Whether it's the music, the movement, an artist, or a familiar memory, your body can create a stimulus for the mind that brings a sense of harmony. The result is a feeling of personal growth that can expand to all aspects of life. It's not just a dance class. It's giving your body life, connectivity, and challenge. With over 100 drop-in classes a week and a variety of workshops, you'll find a class that you love. Please visit www.harbordance.com for class schedules and more information.
What's going on, Daddy? How you doing? Ooh, damn! What you talking about? Ooh,
I'm gonna add that to the episode open. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Unplugged podcast. My name is Rory Bonozo, and I'm a former dance studio manager turned dance entrepreneur and advocate. Hope that everyone is staying safe, healthy, and doing well amidst this pandemic. Now, if you're tuning in for the first time, it's been over 4 months since we last released episodes on the Unplugged podcast, and in that time, we've been learning and unlearning, continuing to provide resources and tips to our community both locally and abroad, and also launched a new show called The Artistic Process with Julia Tripoli. Now, over the next few weeks, we'll be releasing episodes from guests who reside in the Vancouver area. Since we rebranded back in November of 2019, we knew that our platform was also needed in other communities across the country. With our recent trip to Vancouver, we got to know more about the Vancouver dance scene, what it offers, and how we as an organization can lend support. Our next guest today in our Vancouver series is Prince Nii Engmann. Prince is an educator, choreographer, and dancer from Vancouver, BC. Born in Toronto, Prince grew up dancing and playing instruments in a cultural setting, which contributed to his movement and understanding present day. He has had the opportunity to dance and work for the likes of Mandy Moore, Tony Testa, Kenny Ortega, and Chris Scott. He also currently teaches Afrobeats and hip-hop classes around the world. Prince hopes to spread his love and understanding of music, movement, and culture in every space he enters. In his episode, we talk about his experience as a Black dancer in the Vancouver community, allyship when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, and the importance of having integrity as an artist. I cannot wait for you to hear what Nii has to say, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Again, this is Season 2, Episode 8, Number 41, called Cause and Effect, with Prince Nii Engmann. Recording from downtown Vancouver, I'm joined by educator, activist, dancer, director, choreographer, Prince Nii Engmann. How you doing, man?
I got all the credits. I'm good. I'm good. How are you, bro?
Good. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to meet up with me, and
no problem.
Appreciate
Thank
you having on the show. How you been?
Good. I can't complain. I've been doing well. I'm safe. I'm healthy. Taking care of my mental, so I cannot complain.
Very important. Take care of the mental, people. Mm-hmm. Take care of the mental.
Very necessary in this climate, especially within dance and outside of dance.
100%. Well, for all of our followers and listeners of the Dance Plug Canada and I guess subscribers of the Unplugged podcast, I know we've been on a bit of a hiatus, so we definitely appreciate your patience as we try to navigate through this pandemic. It definitely has been a difficult journey for us because we had the option to go to remote recordings, but for anyone who kind of knows me on a personal level, I care so much about quality. And when it comes to audio quality, this is as good as it gets. So again, thank you all for your patience. And I'm glad to be back and kind of get our podcast started up again. So now for those of you listening who don't know who Nii is, maybe you could kind of tell people, what your journey has kind of been like in dance. Like, where did you start?
Right. I probably started dancing out the womb. I come from a very musical family. My dad was a drummer. My mom was a singer and a dancer. So I've been dancing culturally all of my life. But I started dancing in 2012 out of Studio 604. It was after watching World of Dance here in Vancouver. It was like PG Fam, The Faculty,
Very nice.
NXG Company. The Originators were competing. There was just so many amazing teams at this competition. 247 Company. So I saw that and I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to try it. Took a workshop and here we are 8 years later.
Well, obviously, I mean, a lot has happened over those 8 years.
100%.
Which we'll probably get into throughout the interview. But are there any, I guess, key individuals that played an integral role in your development during that time?
Yes. At dancers or non-dancers?
Both, because obviously they play an equal role.
Yeah,
right?
100%. So in terms of non-dancers, it would definitely be the owners of Studio 604, particularly Rico Gutierrez and Maricar Gutierrez. They kind of, I'm not going to say unwillingly, they didn't really have a choice because I kind of forced myself on them. But they kind of took me in like family almost immediately, which they do with so many of those around them, to the point where they would, like, I would take class and they basically sponsored me through the studio. So I was able to take all the classes and workshops I was able to do because of them. And most of my training and most of my interaction with the studio community was through Studio 604. And a lot of the connections I made was because they would bring in choreographers from out of town to come teach, who I was able, again, to meet in the space. So definitely them. Dance-wise, coming up, I was very heavily taught by Jerome Esplana, as with 90% of the Vancouver dance community in that realm. But Jerome kind of took me under his wing once he saw that I was actually serious about doing this. And I call myself the Vancouver dance whore. That's maybe a bad word to use. But I use that because I took Studio 604 was my home, but I took class everywhere and from every teacher, because I wanted to experience everything. So growing up, I learned from Chris Bonus. I learned from Elwin Alpuerto. I learned from Roberta Bierman. I learned from Carmen de los Santos. I learned from Scott Forsyth. I learned from Jerome. I learned from, oh my goodness, name upon names. I learned from Richard O'Sullivan. I've danced under Natasha Gorey. AJ Megaman was actually my hip hop foundation and popping foundation teacher. He's an internationally renowned battler and instructor. So I danced with him. The list goes on. Rina Pellerina, sorry. I learned whacking from under her. I've danced with Kim Sato, who I learned locking foundation from. Yeah, yikes. So when I say I learned, I took the time to learn from the vast majority of the Vancouver hip hop, street dance, and choreography scene as I was coming up. And I had some really, really amazing teachers, which is why I'm blessed to be in the position I'm in now.
That's great. Now, I mean, obviously, it's no secret that we're obviously still in the pandemic,
right?
Which we're still trying to navigate through. But as an artist, what has your experience kind of been like, during this process?
Honestly, I'm going to sound crazy, but it's been great. I find that I've been able to take the time for myself that you don't really get when you're obsessed with moving around in regular everyday life. You kind of get into a routine where you wake up, you either read your book, you meditate, you watch TV, you listen to music, whatever it is you do as you get ready. You leave your house, you teach your class, you hang out with your friends, you maybe take a class, you go home, you go to sleep, repeat. But the pandemic kind of shot or put a hole in that for me, which is nice because I had gotten into a place where I was kind of running on autopilot. And that came in life and creatively. Like I was making probably 2, 3, 4 pieces of choreography a week for no reason. There's no reason why anybody should be doing that unless there's no reason. No reason. Unless you're choreographing for a tour and you need to be doing something like that. But it kind of put a shot in it. I was able to be a student for 3 months. I took a whole lot of classes. By a whole lot, I mean over 100 classes, or learned over 100 routines throughout the course of the 3.5 months or so. And I was also able to kind of take the time. I feel like the pandemic was a time of reflection for a lot of people because they were not able to leave the house, so they needed to go and look inward.
Inwards, yeah.
There was a lot of introspective understanding that needed to happen. And I was able to take the time. I was able to deal with some personal stuff that I needed to deal with. And I was able to come out of this a lot stronger creatively, mentally, spiritually, and physically. Actually, I'm in one of the best physical states I've ever been.
Nice.
So it's been good for me that way. So I cannot complain at all.
Now, you have obviously some commercial experience under your belt, but before we get into that, can you describe your transition into that realm? Because you were mentioning, all the training that you've done prior to that in the choreography scene, street dance. But how did you get into the commercial world?
Funny, actually. So I booked my first job in I want to say 14 or 15. So I was a very young dancer. Within this, I was older, but young dancer in terms of experience. And my first job was Descendants 2 under Tony Testa, assisted by Jeffrey Mortensen and Louise Hratsky, directed by Kenny Ortega. And I went to the audition, got to dance in front of Tony, and he liked what he saw. And yeah, that was my first big industry gig, which is huge. A Disney movie is quite a big thing to get. And it was a very big learning experience. I learned a lot from him, just in terms of leadership and creatively, and actually on the job. That there's only certain experiences you get by working, right? So that was my transition. Was me going to the audition, being like, oh, why don't I try it? Tried it, worked out really well for me that way, and. Yeah, the ball has been rolling ever since.
That's great. Now, during the current climate, obviously, there's a lot of talk about very important subjects, one of them being the Black Lives Matter movement. And one thing that we don't really talk about as often, obviously, on this platform are Black artists working in the commercial industry. What has your experience been like as a Black artist in the commercial dance industry, but specifically here in Vancouver?
So for those of you who don't know, Vancouver is very heavily film and commercial based. I don't know of many jobs within the music industry here, and if they are few and far in between. So as one of under 10 Black male dancers in the city,
wow.
And one of the, I want to say, maybe around 5, I'll say around 5 commercial Black dancers in the city. It's a blessing and a curse. I'll say that. Because I am one of my look and my type within the city. And because of that, a lot of jobs that do come up, I have the opportunity of doing because I kind of fit the bill that way.
The quote-unquote bill.
The quote-unquote bill that way. And at this point in my career, I know that if I get a job, it's not because of my ability, but it's because I'm not what they were looking for specifically for that. So I'm actually quite close with all the other Black male dancers, specifically in the industry here in Vancouver. So I know if I'm not getting it, one of them are going to get it at the end of the day. So it's good in the sense that I've been able to work. I've been blessed to be able to work quite consistently because of that. But because of that, I've also been put in a box, per se, in terms of what they're looking for. And it works in two ways. One, especially with film, you want to be as accurate as you can to the story.
Yeah.
So if a story is set in 1800s in England, you're probably not going to find many Black people within that time, right? Especially because of the climate. And if you did, you're going to find them in very specific roles, right? So there's that side of the coin where you want to be as accurate to the story as you can. But because of that, most of the auditions with this specific climate, most of the auditions I got pre-COVID were that of the security guard or of the henchman of the drug dealer or of...
So as you name these, I can totally see.
Right. And the thing is, like, if for those of you who don't know me, I am a 6'3", 230-pound big black man. So you can just imagine any role, hearing me say that, any role you think I would get is probably auditions I have gotten. There's two sides to that coin. Again, you want to be as accurate as you can to the story, but at the same time, it feels like they're trying to fill their quota.
Yeah.
Or everything is very much a typecast within that. Which again, because there's so few of us here, again, I'm blessed because I'm working quite a bit, but at the same time, on the flip side, it took me a while to get to a point where I understood that I was booking jobs because of I had confidence that even if I booked jobs because I fit the look, my ability was also there. And that becomes a thing in the industry where you may be booking jobs and you may not be the best. I know there's been a lot of conversation of people booking jobs specifically because they're pretty or specifically because they look a certain type of way. And that was for me a similar conversation with myself. And I had to get comfortable with the fact that I am confident in my own ability as a mover, as a dancer. And if I book a job, it's phenomenal. And I know I will, when I get on the job, I will be able to execute whatever vision the choreographer has because I'm confident in my ability. And if I don't book the job, it's not because I'm not able to do it. It's because I wasn't what they needed in that moment.
Gotcha. You touched on a very interesting point in that answer when we talk about filling a specific quota when it comes to commercial gigs. Now, one thing that I haven't asked, especially some of the black artists that I've had on the show, is if you've ever felt tokenized, right? Like when you're booking gigs, do you think you get them because you're the one black person that they just need to kind of fill, right? Have you been in any other gigs or any past jobs prior where, there were multiple black people kind of booked? And if so, like, what made you guys different?
Right. Speaking specifically about dancers, there's not many black dancers within the industry here in Vancouver. But if you're talking about the entire production, from what I've seen on the jobs I've done, production has done really well in terms of background actors or any sort of extra performers in terms of making sure they're as diverse as they possibly can. The dance industry here in Vancouver is a little different, again, because there's not many of us here. But in terms of the actual full production and full cast, production here in Vancouver for the jobs I have worked on has done quite well to make it look like the world around us, because that's ultimately what needs to happen, right? That was my reference beforehand in terms of if the job was for a time where there were not many black people within that, it wouldn't make sense for many black people to be in that scene. So in terms of like, it is very different, I guess, for me here in Vancouver, because I understand that I'm one of a few black dancers in the city. So if they need a big black man, or if they need a black man who can play 23 to 33, I'm probably the person they're going to book for the job, because again, that's what I fit and that's what I play. But I feel like a lot of the Vancouver dance industry or Vancouver film industry has done really well in terms of representation across the board.
Nice.
Rather than just within dance, because again, there's not many of us in this dance community. Which is, again, a blessing and a curse. I'm not mad. Book me.
Earlier, you were talking about how there obviously aren't a lot of black dancers in the...
There aren't any black dancers here in Vancouver.
But would you say that you're pretty tight-knit, like as a group?
Yeah. For the most part, we all know each other, or the most of us do know each other. And again, there's a lot of different areas or communities within the Vancouver dance community. So I'm very much within the choreography dance scene, and I was heavily in the street dance scene before I became as heavily involved in the choreography scene, but I do know those in the street dance scene. But there's those that teach at dance schools and those that teach at other drop-in studios that may not be as prominent as, let's say, like a Harbour Dance Centre or your A3 or Studio North. But yeah, for the most part, we all know each other.
Okay, so back in June, you, along with 3 other Black artists in the community, let's see if I can remember their names, Kevin Frazier, AJ Megman,
Yes, correct.
and Mikhail Morris, or Venom, if you're in the dance hall scene and kind of know, calling it all that thing. But the 4 of you got together to create this town hall, I guess you could say, to talk on I guess various topics when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement within the Vancouver dance community. Can you kind of reiterate some of those topics that I guess you discussed? Maybe you can talk about, how the idea came to be, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Right. So I had this idea because I had, again, when all of this sparked up, I specifically have been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, or have been vocal about the Black Lives Matter movement since Trayvon Martin. So as soon as the movement arose, before the corporation, as the movement was taking life, I was kind of very vocal about it at the time as well, and have been since that time. So I have been the person a lot of people have been coming to within the Vancouver dance community, asking questions, asking for clarification, trying to find information, specifically in dance, and how to navigate the whole topic of cultural appropriation versus appreciation. And so in order to make it easier for myself and for the entire community, I decided to hold a talk for the Vancouver dance community leaders. And that's why it was called Vancouver Dance Leaders Meeting. And I decided to invite people from all aspects, or try to invite people from all aspects of the community. Mikhail Venom is a educator and a professor at SFU, the local university here, where he teaches Jamaican and dancehall culture. Mega Man AJ is very heavily involved, again, one of the best poppers in the world. And he's very heavily involved in the popping and hip hop scene worldwide in street dance. And again, he taught me when I was coming up in the community. So he's been here in Vancouver for quite a while. And then Kevin Frazier is very heavily involved in the LGBTQ plus scene, and has done amazing work in terms of like setting up balls, and has done great work in the voguing and whacking scene in the community. And myself, I grew up in the choreography scene here in Vancouver. So I did have a lot of insight and information in that. So I tried my best to find a Black woman within the community who could also join the talk to share her perspective. But I was only able to think of one, which tells you everything you need to know about how many Black people are in the Vancouver dance scene. And she was not available to do the talk. So that's why the 4 of us men decided to do it. And the topic, again, was cultural appreciation versus appropriation, and how to be a better ally within this time. So it was a really great talk, and we were able, because all of us are from different aspects of the community, we were able to address a wide variety of topics within that community, including, as a teacher, what is your role to your students? As a student, what is your role in the classroom? As a dancer and an artist, what is your role to that form of art or to the culture? There were so many different things we were able to discuss that encompassed quite a bit. It was a lot of information, but all that information kind of had the same heartbeat, in that everything we do comes from a culture. Specifically in terms of dance, you can't separate the dance from the culture, because ultimately dance is a part of Black culture. It's not its own separate entity. But a lot of people have been treating it as its own entity. stripping the black away from the culture, from the dance aspect of it. For myself, I come from Ghana, West Africa, and dance is very, very heavily involved. Again, I danced culturally growing up. It's involved in every aspect in terms of like your funeral, your wedding, your birthday party. You walk down the street and people are dancing because they have food. Like every single aspect of life involves some sort of movement or communication. So I actually had a good conversation with my dad before I did the talk. And I was like, Dad, how do you feel about dance? Because my dad was a drummer. And he was like, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't make sense? And he was like, well, you know that dance is a conversation. So it doesn't make sense because when I see people dance, I don't understand what they're saying. I'm so confused as to it's almost like they're trying to string words together and forming a sentence without understanding what the words mean, how the letters should be placed, and how a sentence structure works. And that is an understanding you get when you understand the culture behind the actual movement you do. It's also why I know this was an issue back a little while ago, maybe even now, of people doing light feet and taking the style and locking in off beat or not knowing what how to properly do a bad one, et cetera, et cetera. And that's because they see it and they don't understand the context to it. They don't understand that there's a beginning, middle, and end to something. And so they just take what they like and throw the culture away from it, which if you do that to movement, you are actually essentially taking away its essence. So that was a very, very big point. And that, again, that kind of separates the cultural appreciation versus appropriation, because appropriation is stealing, right? So that was, if not the biggest topic, one of the biggest topics we kind of tackled within that as an ally and as a guest of the culture, it is your job to embrace every single aspect of the culture. If you're going to be a part of the hip hop scene, you need to appreciate and understand the good and the bad. You need to understand that hip hop is the way it is because of what was going on within New York at the time. Blacks were not allowed to party with white people. And because of that, they made their own parties. And that's why it grew to the way it is. You need to understand how gangs played a part in the hip hop scene then, and how the blacks and the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans and even the Italians played a part in how hip hop came to life. And even at the beginning, it wasn't called hip hop. That was a term that was coined later on. So. Yeah, you need to understand all aspects of something if you're going to do it, especially if you're going to make money off of it. Especially if you're going to be in the position of an instructor or a teacher, you need to understand what you're teaching or what you're saying or what you're selling. I use this example a lot is imagine going to a calculus class in university and your teacher learning calculus as he or she is teaching you. That is, nobody would want that. I would not wish that on anybody. In the same way, teachers and professors understand their craft in order to be able to translate it to others. And keep in mind, there are some bad university professors, but that's its own thing. They understand the craft that they're in front of the room trying to educate people on. The same way we should hold educating people on dance in culture, because again, there are not two separate things. So that was, if anything, the biggest takeaway for, I hope, for the Vancouver dance community from that.
Do you feel like any progress was made after that particular talk? I mean, it's been a few months already, and everyone's still kind of navigating through the pandemic. But now that you've kind of, I guess, spread that knowledge, that awareness, actionable items going forward, do you think any progress has been made since?
Yeah, I believe there has been. Now, whether that progress is reactive or systemic is something that only time will tell. Reactive change meaning you notice something, you see something, and you do something immediately. Systemic change being you understand that it's going to take time to change, so you implement policies in order to change it from the ground up versus just changing one thing. You hiring that one black teacher is not changing the way your entire system runs, right? So only time will tell at this point. And that's why the talk was really to bring awareness, but awareness does not bring change. Even action does not bring change. It is consistent action that brings change. These things need to be continuous because, again, they took years to build. Specifically speaking on the Vancouver dance community, there hasn't really been there's no black dancers, again, here in Vancouver, or barely any. I can't say no. Sorry, guys. There's barely any black dancers here in the community. And because there hasn't been there's not even black dancers, there's not many black people in Vancouver in general. And so because of that, because of the lack of black culture, they don't understand the attachment of dance or any other black art style or black culture derivative. They don't understand how it actually folds into black culture because there's no black culture for them to attach it to here in the city. So it's not just a Vancouver dance issue. It is more so like the Vancouver community as a whole needs to understand that, again, you cannot separate the art form from the actual culture because it's in direct connection.
Mm-hmm. Now, with that being said, and I guess based on your findings, what would you like to kind of see more of, from your community when it comes to allyship?
Mm-hmm. It would be information. Now, let me clarify that. When I say I would like to see more information, I mean I would like to see people utilize their resources to gather, study, and understand information more. Because I feel like a lot of people will read something, but they'll fail to understand the actual depth of what they're reading or what they're understanding. And there's a lot of depth when it comes to anything cultural. That could be black culture, that could be Asian culture, that could be Indian culture, that could be native culture. There's a lot of depth that comes with it. We have so many beautiful resources. Like our phone is such a beautiful resource you could Google something and find it out in 30 seconds. But it's how you actually ingest that information and understand that this is years of information. And it's not just with dance, but with anything that pertains to culture or with anything political, is that it took time to set up. It's going to take time for you to understand, and it's going to take time to change. And a lot of people are so anxious to be looked at in a certain light that they're trying to do things I feel like almost too quickly. And they're not giving themselves the benefit of the doubt to learn. And they need to take the time to learn. For me personally, I don't have any issues with anybody who is willing to learn. Again, everyone learns in their own time, as long as there is the willingness to learn. Yeah. There needs to be the consistent willingness to learn. So I'm hoping, what I would love to see more of is people utilizing their tools, whether that's your local library, whether you don't even need that anymore because you can find any book you want on your phone. But just utilizing any and every aspect of the tools available to you in order to find the information, again, study it, and to understand it so that by understanding it, you're able to apply it to not just your dance, but how you move about in life as an ally, whether that's for the BLM movement, whether that's for the indigenous community, whether that's for women's rights. In order to be an advocate for these issues, you need to have the information. You need to be smart about how you apply the information. And I've been telling this to people quite a bit, that sometimes if you speak without having the information, you hurt the cause more than help it. Yeah. So people need to be very cautious about how they apply, and understand the information. So that would be what I would want to see more of, because I love that people are, I know a lot of people are mad that's like, it took people so long to get on it. And I'm like, honestly, they're on it. We can be mad about the fact that it took people so long, or we can utilize the voice we have now and create change. So I'm happy that people are on it. I just want the information to be used strategically.
That's a good point. If I could offer just, I guess, one tip, because everyone's obviously on their phones a lot. You're going to see a lot of informational and resourceful posts, which I think are absolutely phenomenal. But at the same time, you don't want to overload yourself with information.
100%.
Right? So Instagram has this great feature called Save.
Right.
And, you might see something that might be of interest to you. So, and you might not have the time to kind of take it in now because you're dealing with something else. Save the post.
Right.
Like Nii said, it takes 0.3 seconds to share a post. It also takes the same amount of time to save it.
Right.
So
Exactly.
save the post. When you have time, come back to it later. And then maybe reshare if you think it is necessary.
Right? And also on that, not everything that is a sliding post with a nice title head and pretty letters is accurate. So you also need to make sure that everything you read, you are double and triple checking.
Yep.
And make sure you understand your sources, and make sure you are going to credible sources or credible profiles, because there can be this. You can also spread misinformation with these types of things, which goes back into if you see something and you feel like you should share it, look into it a little bit more. If you really care about the subject, you'll look into it a little bit more to make sure what you're sharing is accurate, so that you are not also spreading misinformation. Because again, misinformation can hurt the cause more so than help it.
I just want to kind of backtrack a bit, because we were talking about allyship within the community. And you had brought up women's rights and how it kind of ties in also to BLM. But one thing that we're kind of seeing now is the continuous exposure of stories. When it comes to sexual assault and sexual harassment. And with that comes, cancel culture and accountability culture. So I want to know what your take is on this, because I think it's very important that this conversation continues, because, there are obviously people out there, and especially when you work in the entertainment industry, it's been normalized to a point where we still aren't having the right, I guess, people in those conversations, or the right people at the table. And so we have to resort to things like social media. And, there has been some kind of good that has come from it, but there still has been a lot of bad that comes from it as well. So I don't know. I just want to know what your take has been on that particular topic. And if you can talk about, cancel culture from a spectrum, I guess give us a better understanding of, what I guess people are trying to kind of achieve with this.
I'm not going to go too deep into it, because I feel like there's a lot of very, very strong women who are also very knowledgeable about this. And at this point, women should be given the platform to speak on women's rights.
100%.
But again, going back into what I was speaking about, information, is that a lot of people are so quick to jump on different bandwagons and different call outs without properly getting their information, or properly looking into a situation with wisdom. And that's very, very big for me. And that's always been very, very big for me. Anything that has to do with women's rights, I have a very, very strong group of women around me I go to about it.
Yeah.
And I get my information from them. The same way any of my close friends who are non-Black people who have any questions about Black Lives Matter or anything to do with the movement, they come to me. And so the reason why I have the outlook on these certain, I guess, call-out culture or cancel culture that pertains specifically to women's rights is because of conversations I have had with them. I think people need to ask the question, without getting too deep into it, because I know people are going to come for my neck. I think people need to ask themselves the question, what is your end game? What do you want to come about from what you are doing? And tying it specifically to the Black Lives Matter movement, I understand that Black Lives Matter, the movement, is looking for policy change. Because at the end of the day, policies are what are currently oppressing us. I know a lot of people talk about it's a morality issue or it's ethics, and I just want to explain this really quickly. So morale is on an individual basis. It's an individual person's beliefs. When you talk about ethics, you talk about the beliefs of a collective community. Yeah, so the morale of your community is your ethics. None of those hurt anybody until they form policy. That is what really, really, really affects people. Policy is the reason why Kyle Rittenhouse can kill people and walk right by cops. That is not a morality issue. Because if that was a morality issue on Kyle's part, then he would have been taken down and arrested and charged immediately. But because there are policy issues and because of the way the police force, as we should know by now, because of the foundation of the police force, he is able to kill people and, as a white supremacist, walk right by police and not have them do anything. So the real danger is in policy. So for me, as an advocate for Black Lives Matter, I am looking to change policy and looking into how to change policy because I understand that policy is what makes these things work. Policy is what makes these things run. So I'm looking at the source of the issue. And that is where my attention is drawn. So if I am sharing anything on social media, it is because I am directly, I don't just share, for those of you who know me, I am vocal about it, but I don't share everything. Because for me, not everything is geared towards changing policy. Some things are just for strictly awareness, which is not a bad thing, keep in mind, but I think policy is really what needs to be changed and looked at. So if you're listening from America, please go vote. Please. And I ask that same question for those who jump on any social media trend, whether that's women's rights, whether that's BLM, whether it's climate change, like whatever it may be that you're trying to speak on, is what is your end game? I don't think women's rights is a simple issue. I think it goes a lot deeper than people think it is. So ask yourself, what is your end game by doing what you're doing the way you're doing it? Whether that may be canceling somebody, whether that may be calling somebody out, whatever it may be, does your purpose serve the goal? Mm. If what you're doing does not serve the goal, again, you may hurt the goal versus help it. Mm. And for me, anything I do, I look long term. Because at the end of the day, I know and understand that my children are going to be fighting this. And my children's children are going to be fighting this. And maybe my children's children's children are going to be fighting this. But I'm fighting this in the way I am so that my children don't have the same fight I'm fighting. So yeah, specifically on women's rights, I want everybody to ask their question. And this is for men and for like anybody who wants to speak on it. Is what you're doing helping the cause? Is what you're doing for the end goal, which is equality? Does what you're doing push forward that ideal? And yeah, I mean, we're all going to have different ways of getting there. I use this example a lot in terms of like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. They had very different ways of approaching the same goal, which was equality for Black men and Black women. They had different ways of getting there, but both were necessary. So we need to get very careful, and this kind of folds into cancel culture. We need to get very careful of the mindset that if you don't approach a topic the same way I do, with the same words I use, you are not for the same cause. That's a very, very dangerous way of thinking. And I feel like a lot of people have gotten into that where someone will ask a question or someone will bring forth a point and everyone's immediate reaction is to attack them. And keep in mind, this comes from someone who is continuously willing to learn. I'm one who is continuously willing to learn, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to know everything about anything. So I'm always open to learning. But we need to get very, very careful about the way we go about educating people and pushing for the cause. Because again, all forms are necessary. Sometimes you need to cuss somebody out and break down their ego. Sometimes you need to. But again, will that serve the goal? Is you doing that serving the goal? Or is you doing that an outlet for your own frustration for what may be going on in your own life?
Yeah. When we tie in, I guess, your end game, your end goal, there are different methods into kind of getting there. And you don't always necessarily have to agree on how to do it, as long as you kind of reach that end goal. Yep. Can you maybe provide our listeners with an example of that?
I'll use, because of the current social climate, I'll use this. The riots that are currently happening across America, or the riots and the protests. I truly believe that both are necessary, because if you look at the peaceful protests that were happening or had been happening for years upon years upon years, people weren't listening. They really were not. The reason why Colin Kaepernick was out of a job was because he knelt during the national anthem. Not for protesting the flag or for the troops, but because black people are being killed. And it was Doc Rivers, actually, I just saw, who said this. It's like he doesn't understand how we keep loving a country who doesn't love us. So these peaceful protests have been going on for extended periods of time. People didn't listen until violence erupted. That is when people, all of a sudden, everyone's like, why don't they just peacefully protest? Why don't they kneel? Why don't they do this? As soon as I think it was a Target. It was first a Target after George Floyd died. I think I may be wrong. May have been the first thing that have gone up in flames. As soon as that happened, look how quick things started to change. Look how quick companies started jumping on it. Look how quick policies started moving around. And it took that one thing. And again, people have been peacefully protesting. It's not like they haven't been doing that. But as soon as an extreme way, as soon as an extreme way of protesting erupted, now the peaceful protests were being listened to, right? And they kind of go hand in hand with each other. And that's why I use the example of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, is that Malcolm X was they called him a radical in thinking. Martin Luther King took the peaceful route. Both were very necessary to get to the end goal. So that's just one example of how there's two very different ways of getting to the same goal, but the goal is the same. And now there are people who may go out just to destroy things. This is why I asked the question, is what you do for serving the goal, or is it just an outlet of your frustration that does not stem from the goal or come from the goal? Because some people just wanted to go steal just for the sake of stealing. That does nothing. That does not do anything. Some people are burning police precincts to the ground because the police are killing black people in the streets. So it's really about the intention and why you are doing what you're doing. Again, if the goal is the same, then I think we can agree to disagree on different methods of getting there, as long as we all have the same goal in mind. But we shouldn't get so caught up on you having to do something the exact way I do it in order to get to the same goal. Because at the end of the day, there's so many different ways of getting there, and all of them are necessary in order to get there.
We're in the home stretch, and I know it might be a lot for everyone to kind of take in now, because obviously all these topics, they're heavy. But again, these are definitely necessary things that need to be discussed, and things that need to continue to be worked on. So take some time to kind of absorb all of this information, and again, look inwards. Ask yourselves, is what I'm doing help the greater cause, whatever that cause may be? But to kind of close it off, I think a lot of people may not know that you are a very spiritual person.
Yeah.
So, I want to talk just briefly about that. How has your spirituality kind of tied into all this? And then also talk about how integrity ties into all that.
So I grew up, we're going to laugh. My dad's a pastor, Pentecostal pastor. So that's where my religious, I guess, background comes from. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm religious. I truly believe in whatever you believe, it is a personal walk with whatever deity you believe in. It needs to be personal. So it actually really influences me in a lot of my decisions in life and how I move about things. Because I look at the Bible like a book of wisdom. It is a book of different stories, of different scenarios that have happened in the past, and how people dealt with those situations, or what consequences came about when people made certain movements. So there's also a saying that there's nothing new underneath the sun. So I think any situation you experience in life, there is some reference to it in some book of wisdom, whether that may be the Bible for some, or the Quran for some, or whatever, again, book you look into. Spiritually in this community, it takes a lot of discernment. I will say, there are some jobs I have turned down just because of what the job was asking me to do. And I did not want to do that, because again, it compromises who I am in my spiritual walk. And it comes down to, again, like who you are trying to be, or who you are trying to portray. For me personally, as a Christian, I am trying to be the representation of Jesus now, which basically what a Christian means, it just means to be Christ-like. So I look at his life and I say, okay, would he do what I'm currently doing? And that's really what it comes down to. So it's a fight, I'll tell you that, especially within the dance industry, especially with the music. I mean, you look at the music we dance to and the music we listen to and everything along that. And it again comes down to what is your end goal? What are you trying to do by doing what you're doing? What are you trying to teach by teaching what you're teaching? Because in truth, I believe there is something to be learned from everything. I could teach to WAP and be able to give someone something substantial by teaching to that. I could teach to a Donnie McClurkin, a gospel artist, and teach someone something to do with that is that will help them in whatever way they may need to grow as a dancer or as an artist. But I truly believe in order to advocate for anything, whether it may be a religion, a policy, or a certain movement, you need to understand who you are as a human being and where your beliefs lie. Because there are certain things as a Christian that align with my specific beliefs. Someone else does not have the same beliefs I have. So again, the way we move and the way we approach a situation may be different. And I need to be okay with that. But the reason why I'm able to teach the way I teach, speak the way I speak, dance the way I dance, is because I understand who I am as a human being. I understand who I am in my walk with God, and I understand who I am as a Black man within this country. So there's a lot that goes into, there's a lot of wisdom that goes into this. And again, thank God for the wisdom he has given me, because it is a whole fight. Especially within our dance industry, because again, it'll ask you to do so many different things. And it'll almost try to step on your boundaries and step on your limitations in little ways. It's not going to be, sometimes it may be in big increments, but sometimes it's in the little things. And if you're not aware, those little things will turn into that one big thing. And so if you're not using wisdom, you won't be able to catch those things. And ultimately, you may deviate from your path. And this may be, you don't have to be religious in any way. This may just be your personal beliefs. Again, because outside of religion, my beliefs are, or my moral beliefs are based on my walk with God. And I feel like that's what it really is. At the end of the day, religions just don't want you to be an asshole. At their core, all of them do preach love. So is what you're doing loving yourself and those around you, or is it hurting you and those around you? Is really the question you should be asking. And that kind of ties into everything we've been talking about, is what you're doing helping or hurting? And if you are unable to answer that question, then until you are able to answer that question, you probably shouldn't move, or you should probably take the time to meditate, get the information you need to get, understand it, so that when you do make a move, you're making an educated and wise move that will lead with love. And again, by leading with love, you will end up helping the situation, versus leading with fear or anxiety, which will force you to move too quickly, which may, again, end up hurting the situation. So my spirituality definitely helps in the way I approach situations, every situation at the end of the day, because again, WWJD. And I mean, sometimes you may do something that is uncomfortable and that you don't want to do, but that may be what is necessary for you. And again, this is just speaking for me personally. I know everyone may not be spiritual in that sense, but just lead with love. That's really it. And if you do so in any situation you navigate in, whether that may be a civil rights movement like BLM, or a women's rights movements, or whether that be LGBTQ plus issues, if you lead with love, it'll help you view things from a much clearer lens than leading with fear. And I feel like a lot of people, based on fears, will react. And that is, again, not helpful. So, yeah.
Perfect way to end it, man. Nii, always a pleasure. Thanks again for being on the show.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Before we let you go, did you want to drop your socials? Like, how can people get in touch with you? How can they follow your journey?
My Cash App and my my PayPal is no. I mean, I'm on Instagram at Prince Nii. Nii is spelled Nii. And yeah, if you guys have any questions about anything that have been talked about, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, I am always willing to discuss and learn and unlearn within this time. And if you guys need anything within my power, I'll be glad to talk with some of you. So I'm excited to talk to you guys soon.
Again, thank you all for listening and being patient, because it's been quite a while since we've done, obviously, one of these. My name is Roy, the host of the Unplugged podcast. Again, you can follow us on Instagram at the Dance Plug Pod, which is our dedicated Instagram account for both podcasts. Make sure to check out The Artistic Process with Julia Tripoli as well. She's been bringing on a plethora of great guests and a lot of very interesting topics. And our other Instagram account at thedanceplug.ca, and on our website at www.thedanceplug.ca. Again, my name is Roy. I'm the host of the Unplugged podcast, and we will see you guys soon.
Yeah! Boom.